predators don't pick victims randomly. Research shows they can identify a vulnerable target in under 7 seconds, just from the way someone walks. Not what they're wearing, not where they are, how they move. Scientists confirmed this. Convicted offenders confirmed this. They all described the same signals. And the part that stays with you, these signals have nothing to do with weakness. Some of them are things that happen to you after trauma. So the real question is, are you sending them right now? There's a study most people have never heard of. Not because it's obscure, because it's uncomfortable. It was conducted in the 1980s by researchers Betty Grayson and Stein. And what they found was so specific, so replicable, that it quietly changed how criminologists understood predatory behavior. They filmed pedestrians on a New York City street. Then, they showed that footage to convicted violent offenders, men serving time for assault, robbery, rape. They asked each one a simple question: who would you target? The men didn't know each other. They hadn't compared notes. They circled the same people, almost every time. What they saw wasn't weakness in the way we usually mean it. It wasn't a woman alone. It wasn't expensive jewelry. It was something moving underneath the surface, something the body was saying without the person knowing it was speaking at all. The researchers called them nonverbal submission cues, small biomechanical signals. The length of your stride, how your arms swing or don't, whether your gaze drops before you've even made eye contact with someone, as if you're already apologizing for existing in the same space. A slight inward collapse around the chest, like someone waiting to be hit. Movements that are asynchronous, the left side of your body not quite matching the right, as if something got interrupted at a neural level and never fully recovered. That last part matters, because asynchronous gait, that subtle mismatch in how you move, is documented in survivors of chronic trauma. Not all of them, but enough that researchers noted it specifically. Your nervous system learned to brace, and that bracing left a signature. This is where the study becomes something harder to sit with. The same men who identified targets in seconds, some of them described what they were looking for in almost identical language. Words like preoccupied, distracted, not all there. They weren't describing someone who looked afraid. They were describing someone who looked like they'd already left their body, someone whose attention was turned inward, managing something invisible: anxiety, grief, hypervigilance, old pain. while still trying to walk through the world like nothing was wrong. They found that easier, not more satisfying, easier. And that distinction is important because it tells you something about how predatory selection actually works. It's not primarily about desire. It's about risk calculation. Offenders, particularly practiced ones, are unconsciously running threat assessments. Who will fight back loudly? Who will cause a scene? Who will be believed? A person who is already internally overwhelmed is a person whose reactions will be slower, whose protests might be quieter, who might not even fully process what's happening until it's over. The predator doesn't know they're reading trauma. They just know they feel safer approaching that person. Subsequent research complicated this further. A 2013 study published in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence confirmed that individuals with prior victimization histories were identified as more vulnerable by offenders, not because they were inherently weaker, but because the body had recorded the experience. Like a bruise that doesn't show on the skin, but changes the way you hold yourself. This is the part that tends to make people go quiet. If trauma changes your gait, and your gait increases selection risk, then the harm doesn't end with the original harm. It travels forward. It makes the next harm more likely. Not certain, but more likely. That's not a flaw in the research. That's what the research found. And it compounds. Because the people least likely to have been taught about body language, boundary setting, or safety awareness are often the people who grew up in environments where those things were never modeled, where bodies weren't yours to protect, where saying no had consequences, where you learned very early to be small, to be quiet, to disappear slightly, because that was survival. That survival strategy, that learned smallness. That's what gets read on a crowded street in under 7 seconds. The researchers never published a clean solution because there isn't one. You cannot simply decide to walk differently and undo what the body has recorded. But some trauma-informed practitioners have noted that somatic work, physical therapy, movement practices that rebuild proprioceptive awareness can shift gait patterns over time, not as a safety guarantee, as a way of returning to your own body. There's a difference. It also matters to name. None of this places responsibility on survivors. The offender makes the choice. Always. But understanding how selection works gives you a different kind of knowledge. The kind that doesn't blame, but doesn't look away either. There's something quietly devastating about the idea that what was done to you can be read by by a stranger before you've said a single word. And something quietly important about knowing that. If this sat with you, share it with someone who should hear it. Not to frighten them, because they deserve to know what researchers know, what offenders know, what most people are never told.